and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn on the history of Valentine's Day. I am your host, Bob Exarin, Access Services Librarian, and today we're going to talk about sort of how this holiday came into existence and the way it's practiced around the world now. So what is Valentine's Day? Not everyone comes from a culture that has celebrated this, but in essence, Valentine's Day is a holiday that celebrates the role of love and romance in everyday life. It's held on every February the 14th, which is the day that Saint Valentine was martyred. That, of course, leads to, well, who is Saint Valentine? Actually, there are three different Saint Valentines that get brought up with this. Two of them, Saint Valentine of Rome and Saint Valentine of Terni, have short hagiographies, which is a fancy way of saying a bibliography, and lots of legends surrounding them. There's even some confusion between the two figures, but they're kind of the two we know the most about. Of the third, the only thing that's known about him is that he was martyred. He died for his faith in Africa. So what do we know about kind of the other two? Well, we know he was a religious authority, possibly a bishop, possibly a priest, possibly both. He was at one point put under house arrest for trying to convert people to Christianity. It didn't quite take, and we'll get into that in a second. But he was eventually released from house arrest, worked his way up, became actually fairly close with the Emperor Claudius II of Rome, who he then attempted to convert to Christianity, but failed to do so. Claudius II then tried to convert him to the ancient Roman religion that was not Christianity and failed to do so. But in doing that, he ordered that Valentine be executed, and he was. He was then buried by the Flavian Gate in Rome. So what are his stories then? Well, outside of sort of this general life trend, there are two main sets of stories that are attributed to him. The first is that he converted the family of his house arrest. He converted his jailer, Asterius. He converted their relatives and 44 other people sort of in their community by curing Asterius' daughter of blindness. And he is said to have given Asterius' daughter sort of a very simple note, but that is sort of legendarily considered the first Valentine card. He also is said to have conducted Christian weddings in secrecy, and this was important because at that time under Roman law, this meant they would not have to be conscripted, forced to serve in the Roman army. So this was a very big deal, obviously, for the people getting married. He's also said to have given the men little tiny paper hearts to give to soldiers to kind of remind them of their vows. That's, as we're going to see, it's going to grow into this idea of a Valentine's card, having these sort of paper reminders of the feelings and affections. And it was sort of a gradual growth. So obviously when he first was passed and buried, there was not a Valentine's Day. It was a long time before he was canonized as a saint, and then given this sort of date for the commemoration of his passing. It meant a long spread. And starting at about the year 500, so about 1500 years ago, it aligned with the Roman holiday of Lupercalia. Now, if you do look in research, which I did, you'll see that this gets brought up a lot, that Valentine's Day seems to have been purposefully meant to try to take over and supplant the Lupercalia festival in Rome. It's now actually kind of questioned and hotly debated. There's not a lot of evidence to say that this was done on purpose at all. But basically, the Lupercalia was an ancient Roman holiday. It was dedication to purifying yourself, strengthening your relationship to the land, with health, with a lot of things connected to that. And this holiday kind of seems to have overlapped and supplanted it one way or the other. But it doesn't initially have a connotation then of love, either from what was being celebrated or from this commemoration for the saint. The first hint we get of love being added into the equation comes in 1382 in the poet Geoffrey Chaucer's work, The Parliament of Fowls. In that work, he mentions that on St. Valentine's Day, this is the day when all the birds of the world apparently are able to find their soulmates. So this image of sort of birds flying around, having romance with each other, then sort of brings this idea that, oh, there's this romantic aspect to this holiday that very quickly then spreads to the not bird, very human realm. So in 1400, you have Charles VI of France, who writes the Charter of the Court of Love, where he describes on Valentine's Day that there's now a lot of feasting, there are song and poetry competitions, there's jousting, there's dancing, and there's also, well, the Court of Love. And there is some historical debate about if these courts really did exist or if this is just something that Charles VI wrote. But the idea was you would have these courts where couples could bring their disputes with each other, the arguments they're having with their partners, and it would be settled by all the couples in the court. They'd all get to weigh in and sort of resolve it there. And it's shortly after that, in 1415, that we do have the earliest existent Valentine. This is from Charles d'Orléans to his wife after the Battle of Agincourt. We're not going to go into the full history of the Battle of Agincourt. We would be here for quite some time. But the important bit for today's presentation is Charles, as the Duke of Orleans, was imprisoned for a very long time. He was captured at that battle, and he wrote this to his wife, who was very young at the time. It's a lengthy poem, but it opens, "I am already sick of love, my very gentle Valentine, since for me you were born too late, and I for you was born too soon." It then goes on to ask forgiveness for being estranged from her and says, how much I miss you and love you. So you have in this, it looks kind of fast on this slide, a 1,000-year period. But in this period of time, we see the growth of this as a romantic holiday then. It goes from just commemorating the saint to having this sense of romance. But it's still a fairly small holiday. It doesn't really spring huge until we get to the 1800s, about 400 years later. By this point, there's the existence of cards. The postage stamp gets invented, and in 1841, that invention leads to 400,000 Valentine's cards being mailed out. So you have an example of that on the left hand of this slide. The cards are very elaborate. There's lots of flowers. There's lots of nature. Some of them will have lace. This card has in the center of it a picture of a Cupid, as we would know. Cupid, angel of love, coming out of Roman Greek tradition, carrying these cards between to show the expression of that. And the holiday at this point just sort of really kicks off big time. Within 10 years, right, we have writings, Graham's American Monthly, saying that St. Valentine's Day has become a national holiday, holy day. Everyone is now taking advantage of the ability to send these things, to be able to express their love to each other. And within 20 years of that, we have the introduction of candy into this holiday. Cadbury makes their fancy boxes. These are heart-shaped boxes of chocolate. And the two sort of go together, and they get very quickly popularized. And within basically the next 150 years, it grows to be an international celebration of love and romance with a very large economic impact. In 2003, between all the gifts and cards that people are purchasing and sending, about $26 billion was spent on Valentine's Day in the United States alone. If you look for more current numbers internationally, it's only gotten higher and higher and higher. And of course, in today's virtual digital world, many of these gifts and cards and messages are also being sent electronically, by email, over the internet. So it's become a very big deal to be celebrating this, and a very far growth then from the tiny holiday remembrance of a saint that it kind of begun with. So how do we celebrate this day? Again, you may not have this very strong in your background, depending on where you're from. But we've kind of mentioned the main ways that people do commemorate this, right? There's a lot of sweets that are given. Chocolate and candy are very big at this time, as are fancy specialized desserts. Sending each other flowers, particularly roses. Red roses have a cultural understanding of being romantic, of being passionate. And so it's very common to see a lot of red roses, a lot of red flowers on this day. Sending Valentine's cards. This is very common. Those of you with children, small children, may know that some school systems in the US will have kids sort of give Valentine's cards to each other on this day. But basically, the main sort of thing to do is, any act of affection or love you can do for your loved ones, right? Ways to show them that you do value them and value the love you have for them in whatever shape that may be, whether it's going out to have dinner together, whether it's giving a gift, sending these cards. All of them are completely acceptable on this day. And that's kind of the broad general overview of this holiday. If you want to have a deeper dive, I've put here on this slide a list of some of the titles of books we have that are on this topic. You are welcome to swing by the library to check any of them out. I promise you they're all children friendly, so you can even make it a family reading if you'd like. And hopefully it will help to further the learning. And that's kind of all we have for today's Lunch and Learn. I hope that for those of you who are new to this holiday, that you learned a lot. And for those of you who are more used to and grew up with it, that you learned something a little new, if only about how it sort of came to be the holiday you've grown up with. Feel free to come back again. This is a weekly series. Next week, we will be speaking with April Payne of the Virginia Cooperative Extension, who will be going over how to understand and use the nutrition facts label. So, after you've shared all your sweets today, next week, come and learn how to read all those facts to make wiser choices in what you do choose to eat. I hope you have a wonderful day and keep learning. Bye.